Meridian, Idaho was a picture of suburban calm, a town where families built lives around shared values and quiet routines. In this community, four lives intersected in a way that would lead to unimaginable tragedy. Emmett Corrigan, 30 years old, was the type of man people admired. Tall, confident, and charismatic, he had an air of ambition that made him stand out. He had recently opened his own law practice, a milestone in his growing career as a criminal defense attorney. At home, he was a husband to Ashlee Corrigan, his college sweetheart, and the father of five young children. On the surface, Emmett appeared to have it all: a thriving career, a loving family, and a bright future. But under the surface, cracks were beginning to show. The pressures of running a law firm and raising a large family weighed heavily on him. Long hours at the office became more frequent, and the emotional connection with Ashlee began to erode. Ashlee had noticed the growing distance in their marriage. She was raising their children largely on her own, while trying to maintain the semblance of a happy family. Despite her suspicions about Emmett's fidelity, she tried to focus on keeping their family together. She even sought marriage counseling, hoping to rekindle the bond they had once shared. Yet, Emmett seemed increasingly detached, his late nights and frequent absences becoming harder to explain. In the fall of 2010, Emmett hired Kandi Hall as a paralegal. Kandi was 40 years old, experienced, and confident. She was also navigating her own marital struggles. Married to Robert Hall, a computer specialist at the Ada County Sheriff's Office, Candy's life was far from the perfect picture she presented. She had discovered Rob's infidelity years earlier, a betrayal that shattered her trust and left her questioning her worth. Despite efforts to rebuild their marriage, the wounds never fully healed. Their move from Southern California to Idaho had been an attempt at a fresh start, but the scars of the past lingered. At first, Candy's relationship with Emmett was strictly professional, but as the weeks went by, a connection began to form. Emmett, feeling the strain of his responsibilities, found in Kandi a source of understanding and validation. For Kandi, Emmett represented excitement and attention, things she felt were missing from her life with Rob. Their shared frustrations and growing attractions soon crossed professional boundaries, leading to an affair that they both tried to keep secret. Rob, however, wasn't blind to the changes in his wife. Kandi's late nights at work and vague explanations about her whereabouts began to raise alarms. Rob had always been observant, and now every excuse she gave felt like a lie. He started paying closer attention, noting inconsistencies and tracking her movements. The more he uncovered, the angrier and more betrayed he felt. As the affair deepened, Emmett's behavior at home became increasingly erratic. Ashlee noticed his emotional withdrawal and frequent absences. He was no longer the attentive husband she had married, and his focus seemed to be elsewhere. Despite her growing unease, Ashlee held on to the hope that they could work through their issues. Meanwhile, Kandi found herself caught between her family and the forbidden relationship she had with Emmett. The thrill of their affair came with mounting pressure, as they both lived in fear of being discovered. By early 2011, Rob had pieced together enough evidence to confirm his worst fears. Kandi admitted to the affair after Rob confronted her, a confession that devastated him. The tension in their household became unbearable, with arguments and emotional outbursts dominating their conversations. Despite the betrayal, Kandi insisted she still loved Rob and was committed to their marriage, though her actions told a different story. For Emmett and Kandi, the secrecy of their relationship added an extra layer of intensity. They would meet during work hours or sneak away under the pretense of professional obligations. Each encounter felt like stolen time, but the constant fear of being exposed began to take its toll. Emmett's once sharp focus on his career was slipping, and Kandi struggled to balance her responsibilities as a mother, employee, and lover. The weight of their deception pressed heavily on both of them, but neither was willing to end the affair. As Rob's suspicions hardened into certainty, he became increasingly determined to confront the man who had upended his marriage. He had learned enough about Emmett to know where and when he could find him. Meanwhile, Ashlee remained unaware of the full extent of her husband's infidelity, though her intuition told her something was deeply wrong. She clung to the hope that whatever was causing their marital rift could still be repaired. The tension among all four individuals was nearing its breaking point. Emmett and Candy's affair, which had once been a source of excitement, now felt like a ticking time bomb. Rob's anger and hurt had reached a boiling point, and he was ready to act on the betrayal he could no longer ignore. Ashlee, trying to hold her family together, could feel the pieces slipping from her grasp. The evening of March 11th, 2011, started like any other in Meridian, Idaho. But for the four lives about to intersect at a Walgreens parking lot, it would end in tragedy. The choices they had made, the secrets they had kept, and the emotions they had buried would all converge in an irreversible moment. Emmett Corrigan left his home after a heated argument with his wife, Ashlee. The tension between them had been building for months, and Ashlee's suspicions about his infidelity loomed heavily over their marriage. But as he walked out the door that night, Emmett offered no explanation beyond needing to run a quick errand. Meanwhile, across town, Kandi Hall told her husband Rob that she also needed to step out. What Kandi didn't know was that Rob had been watching her closely for weeks, his suspicions about her affair solidified by his own observations and a tip from their teenage daughter. When Kandi left, Rob quietly decided to follow her. At Walgreens, Emmett arrived first, parking his black SUV in a far corner of the lot. The parking lot was quiet and dimly lit, the rows of streetlights casting pale reflections on the asphalt. Shortly after, Kandi pulled into the lot. Leaving her car parked near the entrance, she slipped into Emmett's vehicle, and the two drove off briefly to find a more private spot nearby. Unbeknownst to them, Rob had already tracked Candy's movements. When he arrived at Walgreens and didn't see her car, he waited. Soon, Emmett's SUV returned, pulling back into the same spot. Rob saw Kandi step out of the passenger side and recognized the man behind the wheel. The confirmation of his worst fears filled him with a mix of anger and betrayal. Parking his own car nearby, Rob stepped out and began walking toward the SUV, the hood of his sweatshirt pulled over his head. Inside his pocket was a compact .380 ACP pistol. As Rob approached, Kandi froze. Emmett stepped out of the SUV to face him, his posture calm but assertive. The confrontation began with words, sharp and cutting, with accusations flying. According to later testimony, Rob demanded to know what Kandi was doing there, his voice tight with anger. Emmett responded calmly at first, but his words quickly became more pointed. "She doesn't want to be with you, Rob," he said, his tone dripping with provocation. Rob, hurt and furious, turned to Kandi and asked, "Is that true? You want to be with him? He's got 5 kids, Kandi." As the argument escalated, Rob's emotions boiled over. He accused Emmett of abandoning his wife and children, bringing up Ashlee's recent childbirth. "Your poor wife is at home with a baby while you're out here with my wife," Rob shouted. Emmett, unfazed, responded with sarcasm and defiance, his demeanor only fueling Rob's rage. The verbal exchange, already tense, took a physical turn when Emmett stepped closer and shoved Rob in the chest. The shove wasn't forceful enough to knock Rob over, but it was enough to push him over the edge. In a split-second decision, Rob reached into his pocket and pulled out the pistol. The small red laser from the sight cast an unmistakable dot on Emmett's chest. Witnesses would later recall the escalation as fast and chaotic. Words turned into violence in the blink of an eye. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but would become the subject of months of courtroom debate. As the two men struggled, Rob fired his weapon. The first shot grazed Rob's own head, leaving a superficial wound on his temple. The next 2 shots were fatal. One struck Emmett in the chest and the other hit him in the head. Emmett collapsed onto the pavement near his vehicle, the bright red blood pooling beneath him under the harsh glow of the parking lot lights. Kandi stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. The scene before her was unimaginable. Her lover lying motionless on the ground, her husband bleeding from the head, and the gun still in his hand. Fumbling with her phone, she dialed 911, her voice trembling as she told the dispatcher, "There's been a shooting. Someone's hurt. Please hurry." When first responders arrived, they found Emmett unresponsive, his injuries fatal. Rob was conscious but disoriented, the graze wound on his head bleeding but not life-threatening. Kandi, visibly shaken, stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly around her chest as though trying to hold herself together. Soon officers from the Meridian Police Department arrived. As they approached the scene, their flashlights revealed the lifeless body of Emmett Corrigan lying on the pavement near his black SUV. Blood from the gunshot wounds stained the asphalt in a wide circle around him. A few feet away, Robert Hall stood with a dazed expression, his left hand pressing against the side of his head where a graze wound from his own firearm had left a trail of blood. Kandi Hall, visibly distressed, stood frozen near the scene, clutching her phone. The officers quickly separated Rob and Kandi to ensure there would be no further altercations. Rob, though injured, was immediately detained and placed in handcuffs while paramedics examined his wound. Kandi was asked to sit nearby, where an officer attempted to calm her and take an initial statement. Her words were disjointed and emotional, a mixture of fear and shock. "It all happened so fast," she repeated, her hands trembling. "They were arguing, and then the gun." Paramedics confirmed what was already evident. Emmett Corrigan was dead. He had sustained 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the head, either of which could have been fatal. Despite the quick arrival of first responders, there was nothing they could do for him. His body was covered with a white sheet as investigators prepared to document the scene. The gun, a compact .380 ACP pistol with a laser sight, was recovered near Rob. Officers marked its position with evidence flags alongside spent shell casings and other critical items. The laser sight had been left activated, its faint red dot still flickering on the ground beneath the streetlights. Detectives took photos of the scene from every angle, carefully cataloging the evidence. The methodical process of documentation contrasted with the emotional intensity still radiating from the key individuals involved. Witnesses from a nearby store were questioned. Most of them hadn't seen the actual confrontation, but reported hearing raised voices followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. One witness described hearing 3 rapid shots before running to look outside, only to see a man on the ground and another standing nearby, holding his head. These accounts, though fragmented, would later help corroborate parts of the narrative provided by Kandi and Rob. Meanwhile, detectives began their initial interviews. Kandi's account was emotional and fragmented as she struggled to recount the events leading up to the shooting. She described the confrontation, the heated words exchanged between Rob and Emmett, and the moment the gun was drawn. "Emmett was just standing there," she said through tears. "Then they were fighting, and the shots." Robert Hall's statement, given later at the police station, painted a different picture. He claimed that Emmett had initiated the physical altercation by shoving him in the chest. According to Rob, the gun fell from his pocket during the scuffle, and in the struggle to retrieve it, the firearm discharged. He insisted that he acted in self-defense, fearing for his life during the confrontation. However, his claim raised immediate questions. The gun had been found with his fingerprints on the trigger, and the position of the shell casings suggested that Rob had fired the shots while standing upright, not during a struggle. As the night wore on, the police worked to piece together a timeline of events. Rob was taken to the hospital to have his wound treated before being transferred to the station for further questioning. Kandi was released later that evening, though she was advised not to leave town as the investigation progressed. Emmett's body was transported to the coroner's office for an autopsy. The results would later confirm that he had been shot twice at close range, with the angle of the wounds suggesting that the shots had been fired deliberately. This evidence, along with the forensic analysis of the gun, would play a crucial role in the legal battle to come. For Ashlee Corrigan, Emmett's wife, the news arrived in the early hours of the morning. The knock at her door and the sight of officers on her porch confirmed her worst fears. Her husband, with whom she had argued just hours earlier, was gone. As she struggled to process the shock and grief, she also had to confront the reality of his infidelity, a double betrayal that left her devastated. Back at the Hall household, Rob and Kandi's teenage daughters were left to grapple with their father's arrest and their mother's involvement in the tragedy. The family's already fragile dynamic was now shattered, and the fallout from that night would ripple through their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The Walgreens parking lot, now eerily empty, was cleared by early morning. The once chaotic scene had been carefully documented and processed, leaving only faint traces of the tragedy that had unfolded there. For the investigators, this was just the beginning. The evidence collected that night, ballistics, witness statements, and physical traces, would become the foundation of a case that would soon captivate the community. But the questions remained. What had truly happened in those final moments? Was this a crime of passion, an act of self-defense, or something more calculated? As the investigation unfolded, the answers would reveal a complex web of motives, betrayals, and decisions that had led to one irreversible act. The tragic events of March 11, 2011, left an indelible mark on the lives of everyone involved. A suburban community once defined by its calm was shaken to its core by the revelations of betrayal, anger, and impulsive violence. At the heart of this story lies a chain of decisions that collided in a moment that could never be undone. For Emmett Corrigan, life was full of promise. He was a talented attorney, a father of 5, and a man whose ambition knew no bounds. But his choices, driven by personal desires and emotional detachment, led him down a path that ended in devastating loss. His wife, Ashlee, was left to pick up the pieces, raising their children alone while grappling with the betrayal of infidelity and the permanence of death. Her story is one of resilience, as she turned her grief into a public message about forgiveness and personal growth. Kandi Hall, caught between two worlds, faced her own consequences. The affair, which began as a source of validation and excitement, unraveled her family life. Her testimony during the trial painted her as both a victim and a participant in the events that led to Emmett's death. For Robert Hall, the night ended with handcuffs, a conviction for second-degree murder, and a prison sentence that would redefine the rest of his life. His claims of self-defense were overshadowed by the weight of evidence that pointed to a deliberate act. The trial and its aftermath brought critical questions into focus. What drives people to make choices that risk everything they hold dear? How do emotions like jealousy and betrayal push individuals to the brink of violence? And most importantly, could this tragedy have been avoided? These questions remain open for reflection, inviting us to consider how we might better navigate the complexities of our relationships and emotions. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime cases that explore the complexities of human nature. Your insights and engagement help us keep these conversations alive.